Breaking this morning, Lindsey Vonn credits surgeons for saving her leg from amputation after a horrific crash to start the Olympic Games. Dr. Kohli is back with us to talk about it. We kind of knew it was serious. You know, she kept updating first surgery, second surgery. I think she posted, I've had my fifth surgery. Then you saw the picture with all the pins. This was very serious. So talk to us a little bit more about the injuries from this crash.
So she sustained multiple injuries, and the injuries unfortunately turned into this complication called compartment syndrome, which is what threatened her leg. But the injury she had, she broke her ankle, she said, which is not such a big deal, but she had a complex tibula-fibular fracture. So those are our shin bones, and a complex fracture means either that it's shattered into many pieces. It means either that it's like a spiral fracture with unstable bone. It could be involving the joint, or it essentially could be an open fracture, which means the bones are sticking through the skin. And all of those really set her up for complications, especially this type of fracture in her leg sets her up for something called compartment syndrome, which is life-threatening and limb-threatening.
Well, this is the first I've heard of it. I think it's the first we both heard of this possibility of an amputation because of this injury. So when you said it threatened her leg, we're talking about the fact that it may have cost her leg. How common is that with compartment syndrome?
So compartment syndrome is one of those conditions in medical school that they say you must not miss because it sometimes sneaks up sort of subtly. But like I said, it can happen from this type of fracture. And essentially what it is that, think about our shin. It's a closed compartment, right? So if you have too much swelling, too much bleeding from the fracture, what can happen is that blood can cause that compartment to swell so much that it prevents any more blood from getting in or getting out, causes so much pressure inside the compartment that you kill off the nerves, you kill off the muscle, and then the only way to save the person from dying, because they go into sort of a shock state, is to amputate the limb. Wow. And so you really want to catch it early because the time course of this disease is pretty rapidly progressive. So you can start to have nerve damage in 1 to 2 hours, irreversible nerve damage in about 4 to 8 hours, and that muscle really starts to die off to the point where you have to amputate in 6 to 8 hours. So Lindsey had said she was lucky that she had her doctor with her because of that ACL rupture that she had had before she started skiing, because then he recognized the symptoms early and treated them right away.
We're seeing some of the pictures of the crash, and we knew that she was in such pain when it happened. Is that kind of the first indication that there's something a lot more serious than like a broken ankle? I mean, she was really in pain.
Yep, so I have suspect that this developed a few days after the initial injury as that edema, that swelling continued to happen. But pain out of proportion to exam is the earliest sign. In fact, we call it the 6 Ps, pain, pallor. So you're not getting blood flow, so it starts becoming sort of palish, and then paresthesias, which is this tingling sort of sensation as the nerves are dying off. And then you put a needle in and you check the compartment pressure, it's sky high. So the way you save the leg, release the pressure on the compartment. So you essentially, and she used the word fillet, you fillet open this covering, which is called the fascia on top of the compartment. So it's called a fasciotomy, and then you leave it open. So most likely Lindsey has an open wound at this point. Okay. Now you leave it open for about a week in most cases, and you can go back in and sew it up. Sometimes if it's a big kind of gap that you have to use a skin graft from a different site to help it to heal, in which case it looks sort of different when it heals. Sometimes you'll just leave it open and allow it to heal on its own over weeks or months.
Whoa.
When you're talking about an injury that nearly cost you your leg, is there any possibility of what you would call a quote-unquote full recovery, or are we just hoping that she can walk somewhat normally again?
Well, it really depends on how quickly they found the compartment syndrome. So if they found it early, there's a good chance there's no permanent nerve damage and there's a good recovery. If it was more than 6 to 8 hours, then you start to have issues with problems with your nerves. Also, how well the fracture is going to heal, because a complex fracture can be really hard to repair. I know she has a lot of hardware in there. She talked about taking it out. So what they'll probably do, it'll take her 6 months to heal from the fracture. It'll take her 9 months to heal from the compartment syndrome. And then in about a year, when she's ready to hit the slopes again, they're going to do a series of tests to try to see really how she's healed. So single leg squats and jumping on a single leg. If she can do that on that leg that had the compartment syndrome without too much injury, that's a good sign. If that leg has about 90% strength of the other leg, then that's a good sign. And if that fracture healed in a way that it's not unstable, the joint, or it's not displaced, meaning it's a nice straight line, these are all signs that she might be able to return to skiing.
That would be incredible.
Right.
I mean,
I'm talking recreational skiing, right?
Probably, because
Yeah,
you're
not
talking
competitive.
not
Yes.
competitive.
Goodness.
At this point,
Yes.
if I was her doctor, I would tell her it's time to hang up her competitive
Right.
skis and maybe coach someone or do something else. But with all the things that have happened to her leg, and I mean, she was crying in that video because the pain was just so severe, I really want her to have a break and heal and focus on herself.
Well, one thing's for sure, she is incredibly tough.
She really is.
So strong to go through all of that. I can't imagine how painful it is. He kind of jinxed you in the last hour because you were like, I'm not going to see you again for a week. And while you
You
were
really
pulling
wanted
out,
me back. Now, just a few minutes later, here I am, Drew.
2 appearances in one morning for Dr. Kohli. Thanks for the double hit.
My pleasure.